It's April 9th, 2008, roughly 1 week since we at the Nolan Law Group filed the first lawsuit in Illinois against Baxter with respect to the heparin contamination problem that has come from China. The lawsuit is just beginning, motions are being filed, discovery depositions have not yet started. But as we look forward, we have questions that we want to look into, things that need to be answered for us to fully assess the extent of this catastrophe. The first question, probably the most important question, as we look at what is actually happening, as we look at the cases that we get phone calls on, as we talk to people who are very concerned about what happened to their loved ones and to themselves, the first and perhaps most important question is going to be, when did this contamination problem begin, and has it stopped yet? Originally, the FDA said that the problem began in September of 2007 with 9 batches of heparin that was produced by Baxter. Seemingly every week or two, the scope of this problem gets larger. As we go forward, as we ask the tough questions, if we demand answers from those who were supposed to have prevented this from happening, the first and most important question we'll be asking is, when did it begin? How do we know it wasn't sooner? We also need an answer as to exactly what the pathology is that caused the death, caused the adverse reactions. Is this simply a matter of anaphylactic shock, or is it something worse? Is this simply what they call the hit reaction, or is it something worse? If it is anaphylaxis, if this is a result of anaphylactic shock or an anaphylactic reaction, is it because of a sensitization problem? We typically think of anaphylactic shock as relating to something that might happen, such as in a bee sting. You're stung at one point in your life, you create a sensitivity to that toxin in the bee sting, and then the next time you get stung, you have the severe allergic reaction. Is that what's happening here? If it is the initial exposure to heparin what started the problem, and then the ongoing exposure is what caused the anaphylactic shock, or is there some other mechanism here? Almost all the news reports that deal with this catastrophe have talked about the deaths. I believe that the FDA now has that death total above 100. We think it's considerably more. But what about the survivors? What about the people who had the severe reactions and yet did survive? Do these people have permanent deficits? The initial reports talked about those who recovered would be unharmed by it, but we're skeptical, and we think it's very important to fully examine the extent of permanent problems that those who survived the adverse reactions had. If we assume, as we sit here today, that there have been 1,000 adverse reactions, that's perhaps only 1% of the total number of people who received heparin during the period of time that the FDA originally identified as a problem, going back to September of 2007. What about those people who didn't have the catastrophic result, either didn't have death or the type of reaction that the CDC and the FDA have flagged? Are they also going to have problems? Typically we think of anaphylactic shock as affecting the heart, causing heart attacks, closing up the throat, interfering with the cardiovascular system. But is there any secondary organ damage that could result as a result of these allergic reactions? If we begin our focus on the primary organs, what diagnostic tests should we be giving to survivors to determine the full extent of what damage might have occurred? The obvious suggestions would be an MRI of the brain. The obvious suggestion would be an EKG of the heart. But what other diagnostic tests are sensitive out there? And are there diagnostic tests that would show the contaminant still in the bloodstream of someone who's alive? It's an awful thing to say, but what will autopsies tell us in those who died? One of the frustrating things about dealing with this problem is that heparin was given to people who were already ill. Because these people were already ill, we believe there's a serious number of additional adverse reactions, a serious number of additional deaths that has not been currently reported. As I said earlier, we also believe that the contaminant probably started earlier than the September of 2007 initial time frame, and the reports we're hearing now would indicate that. We also suspect that it was in a much broader product situation than just in the original large vial distribution that was originally identified. But the other issue that no one is talking about yet, and that I do at least want to put out there, is there a potential for chronic damage from a long-term exposure? We know that we have the sensitization issue that might be going on, like with the bee sting. But what about just a subclinical mild damage that over a period of time would accumulate into something more severe? We're beginning the lawsuit process. That means invariably we're dealing with families in grief, survivors with anxiety. Those families don't want to deal with lawyers. Our life would be easier if we didn't have to deal with people in that kind of grief. But what we're hearing time after time is those families want answers. They want justice. They want to know what really happened. They want to know if their loved one died as a result of this contaminant or just a natural course of their illness. We believe this lawsuit, which we filed in Cook County, Illinois, is the only way to really get to the answer to what happened here. My name is Gordon Johnson. I'm an attorney with the Nolan Law Group, and myself and our other lawyers, our other staff members, our medical people, the experts we've hired, are going to do our best to get to the bottom and to find justice for those who were wrongfully injured and killed as a result of this corporate malfeasance.